Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really do appreciate it. If you're a fan of podcasts or just stories, dark history, all the above, please hit a like and subscribe to this video. So let's get straight into it. I'm not gonna waste any time. So this was called the Peria diving incident. So it's gonna be a story about these men who were working on an oil pipe in the ocean, and they were violently drawn or sucked in at a great speed into a 30-inch underwater pipeline coated in oil. So an oil pipeline, and these unfortunate men were just trying to do their job, and something went wrong, and they all got squeezed inside of this pipe in the ocean. So out of the 5 men, only one survived to share the tale of this unfathomable living nightmare. So one of the divers had a GoPro camera installed as well, which captured the precise moment of the catastrophe. So what it reveals will chill you to the bone. It really will. So the men of LMCS, so it's a company, I believe. There's Fyzal Kurban, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagasar, and Yusuf Henry, and also Christopher Budrum, were assigned to maintain a dormant pipeline on February 25, 2022 at the Berth 6 platform in Pointe a Peria. I don't know what that is, but it's gonna say pretty soon. So the pipeline belonged to Trinidad and Tobago's government-owned Peria Fuel Company. You know them fuel companies, they make big bucks. So these workers, they get paid a lot to do this stuff, pretty much, but it also is very dangerous. So the 30-inch U-shaped pipeline that runs along the seabed was the pipe in question. Its purpose was to move oil from Berth 6, where ships discharge their fuel, to Berth 5, which houses the refinery. Although there was some risk, the 5-person diving team consisted of skilled and knowledgeable divers. These weren't just some random people. These were people with many years of experience that knew what they were doing. So inside a diving bell, a special habitat resembling an 8-foot cube, the team inserted an air tube. So the LMCS maintenance crew had a dry workspace thanks to the driving structure. So this diving bell was like this little thing that they can sit inside of without being underwater. They can just breathe normally. They connect it to the pipe. So that's where they were doing their work. So to move the water inside the work area, LMCS built the cube structure over the pipe at Berth 6. So like what I said, they put it into Berth 6. In order to create a suitable workspace, the cube generated air pressure that forced out ocean water. So when it was prepared, this workspace enabled the team to take off their diving equipment and securely utilize their instruments to carry out their vital task. So they would take off their diving tanks, all the very important stuff, that we need when we're inside the water, but they thought they were safe inside of this little structure. So they had obviously finished the process hundreds of times, doing this process many times, so it's nothing new. So as the 5 seasoned drivers went about their work, nothing unusual happened. Everything was just going according to plan. Everything was fine until it wasn't. 2 weeks prior, in order to safeguard the oil in the pipe and avoid contamination, the company installed an inflatable plug. Though it could be used when necessary, the line wasn't in use at that time. So this is referred to in the industry as dead legs, and there are many risks involved. So again, there's a plug that they put into these pipes that these men are going to work on to prevent ocean water from going out and stuff like that, but it caused a lot of pressure. So it's a dangerous job. So even though this is a standard procedure, the process necessitates careful planning, risk assessment for process hazards, and close supervision. So preparing for maintenance tasks such as these requires extensive planning and discussion, which can take several days or even longer. Sadly, this probably indicates that the oil company was unwilling to get ready for a safe operation, because these safe operations are expensive, so it's just very interesting how companies try to they just try to ignore things when catastrophes like what I'm going to describe to you may happen or could happen. So but the 5 divers were doing as they were told, just like most workers. Unaware of the surprise, the divers made their way down to their work site. It turns out that the pressurized inflatable plugs like this one keep the low pressure air in the pipe. It turns out that the pressurized inflatable plugs, like which I described to you earlier, keep the low pressure air in the pipe and the high pressure air in the diving bell apart. These incidents produced the disaster formula. Ali Jr. was giving a wrench to one of his crewmates as they were trying to loosen the valve to let the plug go. That plug that caused so much pressure, right? So the 5 divers received no alert, right? So as they were like unloosening the plug. So this is where it unfortunately takes a different turn. The moment they removed the plug, the pressure differential inside the pipe created an unrelenting vortex that mercilessly sucked people, equipment, water, and air down into its depths. And this suction strength was so excessive that it literally pulled these 5 men into the very small pipe. And the sanctuary that they were in became a death trap because a torrent of water rushed into the diving bell. So this diving bell in which they were like safely working on this pipe just became this crazy tornado of water that just literally, again, sucked them into this pipe. Very unfortunate. So the sudden pressure difference and water inflow created a force that pulled the men and their tools into the small pipeline. They found themselves rapidly plunging through a vortex of oil and water, struggling to breathe for a painful 90 seconds. And don't forget, they were inside the bell with none of their equipment, so they don't have anything on right now other than their clothes. They're diving swimsuit, but they don't have their masks, their diving tanks, their goggles, anything like that. So imagine for 90 seconds, you're just getting sucked into a pipe in the ocean, not knowing what's going to happen next. They abruptly came to an end. Gathering themselves, they evaluated where they were in the pipe and realized how serious things were. They found that they had settled somewhere along the line where an air pocket permitted them to breathe after the intense tornado of water, air, and oil. So thank goodness these men had some air to breathe, but again, they were trapped in a small pipe in the ocean. No one knows what's going on. Just imagine, just the claustrophobia, and just imagine your body being squeezed through a pipe like that. Just imagine the internal damages they had. So Christopher Budrum, who was the lone survivor, gives a detailed account of what happened.
A tornado, everything just spinning and beating you up, and it happened so fast. I couldn't react. The only thing I remember able to do was cover my head, like in the fetal position. After that, all I remember, I didn't even remember actually getting pulled in the pipe. I just remember going hurled through the pipe at unbelievable speeds. I couldn't hold my breath no longer, man. Truth. When you're holding your breath for too long, after a while, your body, your lungs just fight. Yeah, waist closed, you see a noise. Your body suffering to pull air. An unbelievable nightmare. Your eyes burning. Every time you try to open your eyes, it's burning. You're pitch black, you can't see nothing. Your throat burning. Your ears ringing. Your body sore. And at that point, I tell myself I was gonna dead.
And their battle to survive was like far from over. The men were hurt, disoriented, in complete terror, and trapped inside a 1,200-foot long oil pipe. And humans are not meant to be inside oil pipes. Imagine the fumes that they're breathing in. It's very bad. But the reality of their predicament crushed any chance of survival. The GoPro that had accompanied them on the dive captured every moment of their ordeal, capturing the sounds of struggle and the sheer terror of the men fighting for their lives. So Chris thought at first that they had been thrown head first into the pipe and that they had to crawl out of it. But Kazim, Yusuf, and Fyzal were sure that they had gone in foot first. So he trusted the judgment of the majority. Then, because he was at the back, he told Fyzal to push everyone and gave Kazim instructions to gather the rest of the group. With Chris at the front and the others connected as a chain, they began attempting to escape the pipe. Just imagine how excruciating to squeeze through thick, slippery oil residue in the complete dark, in the ocean, with no equipment. Like, it's terrifying. So they were burdened with severe discomfort, burning eyes, burning throats, and broken bones. Their progress was painfully slow, and they could not see the finish line. The men continued to pray and did their best to move. So Chris warned the men that breathing the air inside the pipe could cause them to become delirious and just very sick, until they came across 2 oxygen tanks with the regulators still attached. He instructed them to periodically take tiny sips from the tank, right? To maintain a clear level of oxygen in their bodies. Because the body, like having too much oxygen in these type of scenarios can cause some bad side effects. So as they continued, the water level increased even though they discovered oxygen tanks. And Chris saw that a few people in the group were having trouble breathing and had various injuries. Others couldn't move because they were blocked. And Chris made an awful discovery when he decided to see how much the water would rise if they continued. With only 2 oxygen tanks for 5 people, the next section of the pipe was completely submerged, making it unsafe to continue and possibly resulting in mutual death. So with this knowledge in hand, Chris had to make the hardest choice of his life. So he pretty much had to go on by himself, like in order to get assistance for everyone. Chris readied himself to inform the others about him going on this lone, journey. So they gave Chris one of the oxygen tanks after they had given them an explanation of the situation. So pretty much Chris told them hey guys, I'm gonna have to grab these oxygen tanks and I'm gonna have to make this journey by myself to bring back help. And most of the other men were hurt, so Chris was pretty much the only one that probably was able to do it. So he swam through the submerged section with the tank in front of him, hoping to find another air pocket soon. Still unsure of how much air remained in the tank and if he was headed in the right direction. So sections of the entire pipe had flooded. Additionally, a few had air pockets where he could breathe, but based on his air quality, he knew his oxygen was running very low after struggling to stay underwater. Poor guy was just imagine you're tasting death literally, knowing that your friends are back there needing help as well. That's so crazy. So he breathed the last of his tank's air while putting his diving instincts into overdrive. Before him, his tank crashed into another metal object, as if by divine intervention. And what he found was another oxygen tank. And it was visible, even though it was really dark, he was able to grab it. So he tested the new tank regulator right away. He eventually located it after scurrying around in the dark, but the regulator was missing. So he forced the entire thing into his mouth. So his mouth was a greasy sludge, like if he had been drinking old motor oil from an old car. So he was drinking oil and breathing air at the same time. That's so sad. He was able to exhale from the tank with relief, but still he was taking in oil. Uncertain of how long he could live, he continued with all of his strength because he knew he couldn't stop. That's when your adrenaline starts pumping, Even worse, he ultimately reached another air pocket as he scrambled through the pipe. However, he knew instinctively that going back to the riser was his only way out. I believe the riser was the place where they got sucked in from. So there was pretty much half of water in his section of the pipe. So the pipe had so much water, and he's somehow finding these, these oxygen tanks that were also brought into the pipe. I just find it crazy. Was that God helping him? Was it angels? It's crazy. Then he discovered additional air tank and arrived at the final flooded section prior to the riser. So he found another oxygen tank. So basically when Chris was going to that flooded section prior to the riser, he heard Fyzal yelling his name. Before he reached the final flooded section, he asked Chris to wait, but Chris told him he couldn't wait any longer because they had been in the pipe for too long and their time was running out. He kept going until he came to the pipe's bend, which he believed would lead to salvation. This fate would be determined by his next choice after what felt like hours. This was the crucial moment right here. This was either birth 6, where they originated, or birth 5, which was sealed off with a plug. So if he is reaching birth 5, he's screwed. He's gonna would have to swim all the way back down, go the opposite direction, but basically he'll be done for. So Chris was so exhausted as he kept swimming, but he was committed to finishing and saving his crew. So Chris finally made it to the top of the pipe with his lungs tired and his eyes burning from the oil. And yeah, he made it out. So even though he lived, the story wasn't over yet. Chris told the medical staff what had happened, right? Including as many specifics as he could about the men and where they are exactly in the pipe. Because yeah, now they have to go back into the water and find these men, knowing that they're dying with no air and broken bones and breathing in oil fumes and whatnot. So unfortunately, Chris' story didn't sit well with the other members of the LMCS team. The company believed that any oxygen tanks they had would only provide them with an hour worth of air, and that the pipeline was full of oil. So they were like, there's nothing we can do. Like, that's so sad. In an attempt to locate the men, the LMCS team rescue divers dove in and banged on the pipe, and the sound of someone knocking satisfied them, which surely gave the trapped men hope. So the trapped men were inside and they heard the banging and they started banging back, and the LMCS people pretty much found them, but I guess they couldn't do it. I guess they just couldn't help. So however, the LMCS team still hadn't figured out how to free them. So the 4 injured divers endured increasing sea levels, a curtain of suffocating oil fumes, decreasing air and carbon dioxide as the hours passed. The 4 men were never saved. Despite initial hopes that the Peria Trading Company and LMCS would intervene to save them. And when the 4 men realized that there would be no rescue, their fears grew. And days after the incident started, the company removed the 4 bodies that were still there. And after doing autopsies, nobody could determine the exact time of death for each man. And also authorities determined that they had lived until Saturday, but also some believed that one lived until Monday. In Trinidad and Tobago, authorities established a commission of inquiry to look into the events leading up to the Peria diving tragedy.
Because everything inside my open I rescue. Everything inside me open I rescue was going on. Nobody was making an attempt to rescue me. I always somebody who doesn't know what's going on, and I was always somebody who could control and see things through, and I feel like...
Yeah, that's a pretty terrible tragedy. And next, what I'm going to show you right now is the footage and audio of that experience. And may their souls rest in peace.
Huh?
Who is that boy there? Yusuf? Oh, Yusuf? How long you have to walk before you meet Fyzal? You and Fyzal was together all the time?
Right now.
Who else with you?
We have Fyzal alone.
Kaz with you?
Right there.
Right there where? Kaz, everything alright with you?
No.
Any limbs break?
All in
Your leg, alright. Five, anything happen to you?
Yeah.
A five?
No way.
Yusuf, anything happen to you?
Yeah, boy.
What happened?
Come on, break.